All right, everybody, I'm obviously Jesus. I have a massive head cold, so for the final video of September 2019 here, I'm going to be making a video that I hope to keep short, relatively short and sweet, on taxation. And this is sort of in the vein of my, well, not in the vein of, but it's sort of a response to, for those of you who don't know, I used to be fairly libertarian and identify in a libertarian way. But, now as I've made videos about, I think, dedicated to the topic in and of itself as well, I've talked about how there are still things to learn from libertarianism, but on a lot of like concrete things like economic policy, I really don't think that there's anything to really take from them. I think they get a lot right in the terms of individual liberty and the idea that consensual or consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want unless it hurts other people. But on economic policy, there's less to love with libertarians. So I want to make a video today tackling one of the bigger libertarian talking points, which is the idea that taxation is theft. Libertarians believe, as I once did, that taxes should be reduced or eliminated altogether. For those who think that there should still be taxes, libertarians often suggest a 10% flat tax that affects all people the same way, no matter how much wealth you have. And we'll talk a little bit about that in this video. But yeah, one of their big things, their big sticking points, is that taxation is theft. The government takes your money and uses it for something that you didn't give them approval to. So I want to answer the question today of whether or not I think taxation is theft, that it has that idea has any merit, and we'll talk about taxation in a larger sense a little bit as well. So let's get into that because, like I said, my head is like full of mucus right now. It's so fantastic, but I wanted to get this video out before the end of the month. So without further ado, let's ask if taxation is theft. And the answer is, in one sense it is, but in a more general sense, no. Because if you define theft as simply the non-consensual removal or taking of something that you have, then yes, by that definition alone, taxation meets the criteria of being theft. For most people, taxes are paid as a subtraction from their wages, money they would otherwise have. It's definitely shown to them as something that they have. In the case of like a land tax or like a vehicle tax or what have you, you do pay it for something that you already have. It's like they're taking away something to compensate for what you already have as well. They're just coming in and demanding something from you. You see how much gross money in your check you earned, and then you see how much of that was deducted from your check in order to pay for state, federal, and local taxes. And with regards to things like the death penalty, I definitely don't believe in letting the government get away with things by a different standard than you would allow normal people to do. So in that sense, there is a way, I think, that you can make the argument that taxation is, in a sense, a form of theft. However, there are huge mitigating circumstances that make the act of taxation by the government majorly different than just one undeserving party coming in and taking what's not theirs. The key operant phrase there is undeserving, because taxation, or theft rather, theft is the act of one person who hasn't earned anything coming in and taking something from you and that they don't deserve. Whereas when it comes to taxation, when you introduce the mechanism of deciding who deserves what, which hopefully will be decided by elected representatives with people's good or best interests in mind. When you introduce the concept of deserving into this equation, it ceases to be simply about one person or one entity taking something from another entity or person. Then it becomes about whether or not there is an ethical and moral justification for it. And I think that in terms of taxation, there absolutely is one. Because in a larger sense, people are coerced into giving their time, their effort, their labor, and sometimes their whole well-being in their lives to jobs that they must have in order to achieve survival in a world that runs on money. It's kind of dystopian and depressing. So while in this sense, no business is more culpable than another, all businesses, all people who run businesses as well and get the highest totem pole level of profit, they are making the most profit off of the labor of the workers, the roads that they use to transport their goods, et cetera, et cetera. And so, at least from a business standpoint, when we're talking about taxing businesses like Amazon, who are making incredible amounts of money and currently pay no taxes because they tax shelter in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland and other places where the tax laws are very strict and the tax evasion laws are very strict, or not very strict, excuse me. But yeah, so when we're talking about businesses, there is absolutely an incumbents on that business to recognize that the person at the top, the CEO, the board, whomever is seeing the most profit from a particular business, there is an obligation there for people to say, yes, we are at the top here. We are profiting from not necessarily our own labor so much as all the labor of the people below us on the totem pole of this business, and as well as the public services that we use to transport our goods and deliver services and what have you. So while we're talking about businesses for a sec, we'll talk about individuals too. There is no such thing as a self-made billionaire, millionaire, or pretty much anyone else who has a large quantity of wealth. From the labor of others to, like I said, the roads and public transportation or what have you, everybody uses to transport goods, get to work at the company, do basically anything. Whether you're high or low in the company, the operation of a business is never truly done in a vacuum. So the idea that there are people who are self-made millionaires or self-made billionaires is a complete fabrication. It's one of the fabrications that goes along with the falsification of the American dream, the idea that you can simply pull yourself up by the bootstraps and turn something into nothing, get blood from a stone, and America is this, in certain people's minds, is this miraculous place where you can turn, like I said, something into, or nothing into something, and make money off of it, and you did that all by yourself. But the fact of the matter is that virtually nobody who makes any kind of large amount of money is doing it solely by themselves. They are using public services like roads, or they are employing other people. Nobody does it themselves, and oftentimes people who have that much wealth inherit it from people who in a previous generation had that much wealth, and they also did not make it by themselves. And, people on an individual level, I've been talking about businesses here for a little bit, but on an individual level as well, people who are just themselves, they are not representative of any larger corporate entity. People also who travel those roads in order to get to work and make money, and they are, in a sense, wearing those roads down as well. So when they travel to their job and make money, it's only fair that they pay a smaller amount of their wages to upkeep the general welfare that everybody uses as well. Obviously, though, the solution is to not make everybody pay the same rate. Because if I have a job and I make $1,000 a week, and my CEO makes $100,000 a week from their pay, if we have a supposed libertarian 10% flat tax, that's going to affect me so much more than the CEO. And even if we take away the fact that the CEO probably does far less manual labor than the person at the bottom of the totem pole, even if that's not a consideration here, it still costs the same amount of money to feed a single human being or to feed a family. That doesn't change regardless of, who you are. It's the same for pretty much every family. So the idea that a CEO who makes $100,000 a week or $10,000 a week should pay the same rate of tax as somebody who makes $1,000 a week is insane, because all that really amounts to is it appears egalitarian. That's the thing about libertarians' idea of taxation. It appears on the surface to be egalitarian and equal for everybody, but in the end, because there's a certain amount of cost baked into life, it winds up affecting the people who are on the bottom of the totem pole doing the hardest grunt work oftentimes in a lot of industries, and it winds up hurting those people more than anybody else, because 10% of $100,000 a week is nothing to the CEO, but 10% of $1,000, that's a lot. That's a lot that is taken away from a person. And I don't know if these are actual good wage numbers or what have you, but it's just the mathematics of the scale. So having a sliding scale that taxes low income people not at all, medium to low income people very little, and then progressively slides up to the highest people being taxed at an extremely, extremely high rate, millionaires and billionaires. Having a tax scale is the only obvious solution, because in terms of what it costs to live, that's the only way to counterbalance it. To give the appearance of egalitarianism with a flat tax does not actually achieve that. It lets the rich get richer, and I'm not going to really go into that in this video, but the idea that giving rich people more money and allowing them to create jobs has never been substantiated. It has always, always, always gone into the shareholders' pockets and the rich pockets when you give people the opportunity to make more money and deregulate them and tax tax rich people less. It never goes to creating more jobs. It only goes to the shareholders, because that's whom businesses are accountable to, and that's why we need regulation. And the government is not only the administrator of all these public services that businesses and individuals alike use, they are also the people who regulate stuff like the FDA to make sure that the food everybody eats is standardized and not full of pesticides and E. coli and shit. Basic stuff that just protects people and protects consumers and protects the general public. Taxes run that stuff as well. And it's not fair to shoulder the burden, or to throw the burden on the shoulders of the poor person to an equal percentage rate as it is to shoulder the people who not only are rich and run the businesses, who are creating the need for regulation and creating the need for things like the FDA, but also who are making just so much more money and will miss it so much less and can be taxed at a higher rate because of that. Like, literally, Jeff Bezos has more money than he could spend in a actual lifetime. It is fucking crazy to imagine. Like, it's genuinely hard for a person in the middle class to actually conceptualize just how much money multi-billions of dollars is. You would not miss it Jeff Bezos would not miss if $2 billion went missing from his coffers. It would be like nothing to him because he makes so much money. So to tax a person who can experience something like that and just shrug it off versus a person who couldn't lose $100 out of their check and not feel it, that to me is crazy. Just that example should dispel any lust anybody has for a flat tax and the supposed egalitarianism that brings. But yeah, taxing scale is the only way to really achieve true equality in practice. And hopefully the people who are being taxed, even at the lower end, who are not making a ton of money, they will still be taxed to help pay for things like healthcare and stuff like that. But it will certainly help if we also pass laws that will help them be taxed on a living wage rather than a wage that is already insufficient and then goes down further after taxes. So establishing a solid minimum wage is another fucking great way to ensure that the tax burden can be met at all levels without people ever fretting for their lives. It's also important to ensure that people can see where their taxes go. One of the things I think I've talked about before that I was really impressed with in Scotland when I went there on vacation in 2017 is that all the museums and a lot of cultural stuff in Scotland is free or extremely low cost. And that's one of the ways where we can see, or they can see, where their tax money is going, and that's a very important thing. And the easiest way to do that in a place like America is to cut hidden spending, like military spending, that doesn't do anybody any good on after a certain point of having, readiness for defense, and then reinvest all that money that we're wasting in programs like healthcare and college that directly and visibly improve people's lives, as well as things like culture that allow people to be connected to the larger world at free or no cost. So that's what I mean when I say I don't think taxation is theft. I already sort of got off the point, but nobody makes money in a vacuum. Not a business owner, not a person being paid a wage by a business owner. Everybody, depending on their wealth, should be taxed to a certain scale that is fair for them, that will allow them to essentially automatically account for the services they use in order to make their money, whether they're making a small amount as a wage worker or whether they're making an exorbitant amount as a CEO or somebody high up on the totem pole. That's how we ensure that, because people aren't going to do it voluntarily. People are not going to do this voluntarily. So in a relatively painless way, we create checks and balances on people earning money that scale with how much you earn, that takes a little bit out of that and reinvests it so that the people can have what they need in order to live their lives and live healthy and hopefully somewhat happy lives that will allow them to go back and continue this process to the next generation and generations beyond that. That's the idea behind taxes.